Good evening. There we go. I want to welcome all of you to this evening's convocation. We also have some folks from off campus. Those of you who are from off campus, I want to welcome you to Concordia this evening. My name is David Loy. I'm the chairman of the Convocation Committee here at Concordia. One of our jobs as the Convocation Committee is to bring speakers in who provide a perspective or a specialization that you won't find with our faculty. These convocations are not tied to any core pair, so they're a little bit different than your core convocations. This evening's speaker fits this description very well. We're very pleased to have her here. She is a Woodrow Wilson Visiting Fellow, so she is on campus today, tomorrow, Wednesday, and a bit of Thursday. Besides presenting today, we'll be giving some classroom presentations. I believe tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock, she is joining the Bella Amore Living Learning Community for Taco Tuesday. So if you'd like to hear more, you can join her there. Before I introduce her, just a few logistics and a bit of etiquette. The convocation runs for her speech, and then after her speech, there's a time of question and answer. That is part of the convocation. So I ask that you stay in your seats until after the Q&A is over. We're watching the time. We're mindful that some of you have obligations at 6:35 or so. But please, when Q&A time comes, stay in your seats. I will take the mic around, so we'll have time for questions and answers from the audience. Our speaker, Ms. Eleanor Clift. As I introduce her, have any of you seen the ads for the Amazon series? Is it The Good Girls Revolt? Amazon's marketing is not, oh, we got a yes. How many, raise your hands, because I'm blind up here. Amazon needs to work on their marketing. Good Girls Revolt is an Amazon series about, I think, is it a fictionalized? Okay. Gotcha. So in Amazon, the series has changed a few names, but it's based on true events, a lawsuit filed at Newsweek, where in the 1970s, 1960s, female reporters' jobs were to find the facts and feed them to the male reporters, who then got to put their names on the stories. Lawsuit was filed. Ms. Clift was working at Newsweek, not in Washington, D.C., not part of the lawsuit at the time. So she has seen a lot of change over the course of time. A lot of times when I introduce speakers, they have very long curricula vitae, so 16 degrees and 4,000 papers. Ms. Clift has several books that she's written. She has starred in a few movies as herself. But it's not a long CV, but it's very impressive for its depth. She has covered politics and covered every election since 1976. So she brings a great deal of knowledge and expertise to us this evening. Worked for Newsweek when they were purchased by the Daily Beast. She went over to the Daily Beast. When the Daily Beast sold off Newsweek, she stayed with Digital, and that's probably why she's here this evening. So will you please join me in welcoming Eleanor Clift.
Thank you, David. I just want to say that the women at Newsweek who filed that lawsuit made it possible for me to go on and have a career and to be assigned to cover the campaign of a little-known governor named Jimmy Carter. And it was my first presidential campaign, and he won, and I got to go to Washington, and I call it my Cinderella story. So, and I have been in Washington and covering politics since then. Politics always delivers surprises, and I must say that I'm giving the lecture tonight that I didn't think I would give. I thought I would be talking about Hillary Clinton becoming the first woman president, and the Democrats picking up 5 or 6 Senate seats and a whole host of new faces coming to Washington on the Democratic side. Well, the Democrats did pick up 2 Senate seats, and there were actually 4 new women coming to the Senate on the Democratic side, including Kamala Harris, who is your Attorney General here in California, who I think has presidential aspirations. Tammy Duckworth from Illinois, who is an Iraq War veteran who lost both her legs when the helicopter she was piloting was shot down. Very impressive person. Maggie Hassan, former governor of New Hampshire, now senator, and Catherine Cortez Mastro, the first Latina woman to now serve in the U.S. Senate. So progress was made for women, but it was a huge surprise and setback when Hillary Clinton did not make it across the finish line, and when every pollster and pundit was predicting she would. So we now have President-elect Donald Trump. I never thought I would have to say those words. So I want to talk tonight about what happened and what happens next as we transfer power in the very great democracy that we are all so fortunate to live in. First of all, 5 million fewer people voted in this election than in 2012, despite all of the media coverage of long lines and seemingly more eagerness to vote. And among the people who did vote, there was a higher percentage of people from the more rural communities of America, more white blue-collar workers who really saw in Donald Trump a billionaire real estate developer, someone who related to them. And that will be studied for years to come. So more Republicans came home to support their nominee, and more Democrats stayed home than all the pundits and prognosticators had predicted. So there's been a lot of soul searching since the election. The anticipated scenario was that Donald Trump would lose, and he'd be a poor loser, and the people who supported him would be out on the streets, and we'd be experiencing civil unrest. Instead, we see the civil unrest on the progressive side, and we have the leaders on the Democratic side basically urging Democrats and opponents of the new president-elect to protest peacefully if they wish, but please let's not let this develop into some sort of a violent resistance. President Obama sat down with Donald Trump 2 days after the election, and they each pledged a smooth transition. Melania Trump met with Michelle Obama in the White House, and so everything is proceeding as it's supposed to in a democracy where the hallmark is the peaceful transition of power. Hillary Clinton, in her concession remarks the morning after the election, urged everybody to have, as she put it, an open mind and give the new president-elect a chance to lead. And I must say that Donald Trump's victory speech on election night very much struck the right tone. He urged the cheering supporters to understand the debt of gratitude that they owed to Hillary Clinton for her long service to the country. And they applauded. They didn't shout, "Lock her up." So I am anticipating that that means he won't be calling for a special prosecutor to continue the investigation into her emails. So we don't know that for sure. Kevin McCarthy, who's a Californian, and he's in the leadership on the Republican Party, he said they were finished with that, but some members of the House still feel that they have enough evidence to pursue. That will be one thing to look for as we go forward, if the Republicans can set aside their investigations and turn the page to a new era. So what went wrong for Hillary Clinton? I think you have to look at the Comey Factor. The Attorney General, 11 days before the election, when people were already beginning with the early voting, sent this cryptic note to the House Oversight Committee that he was looking at some new emails that had surfaced. That triggered very hysterical coverage by the cable networks, who said that the investigation was reopened, and surely Mr. Comey wouldn't have done this unless there was something substantial there. There were learned discussions on television panels about if Hillary Clinton were elected, would it trigger a constitutional crisis, and so forth and so on. Then on the Sunday, 2 days before the vote, the election day, Attorney General Comey said, oh, there was nothing new in these emails, there's nothing there to see. Now, Hillary Clinton herself, in a phone call with her major supporters, said that it was like a double whammy, because the first letter reintroduced the email controversy at the end of the campaign, and the second letter, where Mr. Comey backed away from any further investigation, infuriated Donald Trump's supporters and rallied them, and they turned out in greater numbers. So the Comey Factor is part of what I think prompted Clinton's loss. Second, Obamacare. The announcement in late October that the premiums would be rising. The HHS Secretary Burwell announced it in a phone call with reporters. Now, I don't know that that was necessary, but if it was, she or someone in the administration should have better explained it. Before the passage of the Affordable Care Act, premiums went up routinely every year, and the results of Obamacare, the premiums have gone up at a lesser rate, and they have actually saved the country money. Administration never made that case. And people who were most upset about Obamacare were really not affected at all, and those who were the bulk of them, some 85%, would be receiving a subsidy, which is not to say Obamacare needs fixing, but it does not need to be repealed and replaced, which is something that Donald Trump is coming to recognize. But the exit polls on Election Day found that people who voted for Trump said the top two issues they were concerned about were the economy and Obamacare. Now, Republicans voted over 60 times to repeal Obamacare. Trump has said he would do it in his first 100 days, but in the less than a week that he's been president-elect, he's already confronted some of the complexities. He said he wants to keep some of the provisions he likes in Obamacare and take away some of the others. The ones he don't like, of course, are the ones that pay for the ones he likes. So there'll be compromise on that, but I think that 20 million people who got insurance coverage under Obamacare, I don't think that Donald Trump really wants to take it away from them, and that was one of the discussions that he had with the president in the Oval Office. So you had the Comey Factor, health care, and then you had this overwhelming desire for change. The third term after 2 terms of one party is a hard sell. George H.W. Bush followed 2 terms of Ronald Reagan, but before that you have to go way back in history to find another example. So Hillary Clinton was basically fighting a lot of headwinds, and with the benefit of hindsight, I can look at her campaign and I can see how really propped up it was from the beginning. She was not the candidate for the moment. Maybe Bernie Sanders would have been better. He connected with young people. Joe Biden, I think, probably would have won pretty easily, and he connected with the working class voters that Hillary Clinton lost. I mean, voters this time around, they wanted somebody who had authentic emotion, who shared their anger and their passion for what was bothering them. And while I think Hillary Clinton is a far better person than she was portrayed, she's guarded and she's careful, and she could not compete against Donald Trump, who was basically a kind of a running car crash. He was this shiny new thing, and the voters looked at Hillary Clinton and basically they didn't want any more Clintons, they didn't want any more Bushes. Look how fast Jeb Bush disappeared during the Republican primaries. Also, I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that, as the Washington Post put it, the election turned on a question of national identity. And I'm quoting the Post now. It said, Clinton tried to make history as the first woman president by assembling a diverse coalition representing the country's future, the new America, which is an America made up of more minorities, an America that is browner. Trump built a more powerful and impassioned movement, and he did use the word movement, by fanning resentments over gender, race, and religion. He got the endorsement of the Ku Klux Klan, and he gave a voice to what is known as the alt-right, which basically normalized the views of what we call the white supremacist movement. And they are having a field day on social media, and people who don't agree with them bear the brunt of their criticism. And there was also sexism, and here I'm quoting from the New Yorker, the current issue, which I read on the plane coming out here, and they listed some of the sexist comments. One conservative commentator said about Hillary Clinton, something about her feels castrating. Rush Limbaugh asked his listeners, will this country want to actually watch a woman get older before their eyes on a daily basis? And then there were the bumper stickers, the KFC meal deal, 2 fat thighs, 2 small breasts, and a bunch of left wings. And my personal favorite, even Bill doesn't want me. So I think we have to be honest with ourselves that much of the sort of the blue-collar vote that was Trump's base is really based on the old order of gender roles in society. And they look at Washington talking about, transgender bathroom rights and same-sex marriage and all that, and they think that the people who promote this have lost their minds, and when they're worried about bread and butter issues and how are they going to pay for their kids in college. So I think the Democratic Party sort of floated off into some of these, what you might call boutique issues, away from the bread and butter issues that once defined the Democratic Party. The Founding Fathers developed a system that is based on an enlightened electorate, and I think the conflagration of cable news and social media has given us more heat than light when it comes to news. And the entertainment factor of Donald Trump cannot be underestimated. His tweets at 3 in the morning, we never got this kind of access, if you will, to a presidential candidate. And the Harvard Shorenstein Center did a study of the coverage that he got even before the primaries started, from the moment he took that escalator down in the Trump Tower in New York, and they concluded that he got $1 billion worth of free media. They said that Trump is arguably the first media-generated candidate. So now we have the equivalent of kind of a reality show moving into the White House. And yet, I must say that I've watched Trump perform since election night, and his remarks that night really show that he is capable of rising to the occasion. They took away his Twitter privileges for a while, but he is back tweeting. But the tweets so far have been measured enough. He initially didn't like the protests. He said they were unfair. And then he followed up with a second tweet at 3 in the morning saying democracy is wonderful. It's great that these people are out there and they feel so engaged. Now, one friend, people across the political spectrum are upset. Some of the groups that Trump kind of targeted during his campaign are fearful of what he might do as president. And I had one friend email me, said he understands how Southerners felt in 1860 when Abraham Lincoln was elected. Instead of waiting 4 years until 1864 in the next election, 7 states seceded, and we know what happened after that was Civil War. We're not going to do that in this country. And so I think it's incumbent upon us, now that the results are in, to find some positive things about Donald Trump and to give him a chance, as Hillary Clinton said, to see how he will lead. What I like about him, and President Obama in his press conference today, which I'll talk about in a little bit too, he is not an ideologue. He's not ideological at all. On almost every issue, he's taken opposite positions. I think it's fair to call him an opportunist and a narcissist, but he's not ideological. He is a deal maker. He wrote a best-selling book, The Art of the Deal, in the 80s. It's still one of the top-selling business books. So he might have a lot more success working with Congress. And of course, he's got a Republican Congress who's going to be much more willing to work with a member of their own party than they were with Barack Obama. And there are 9 Democrats in the Senate who are up for re-election in 2018 in states that Donald Trump won. They can be the basis for a deal on all sorts of things. So we have a unified Republican government, both houses of Congress, White House, and the Supreme Court is next. That 5th seat that Mitch McConnell, the Republican Senate leader, refused to fill. He did not hold hearings or a vote on the gentleman, the judge, that Merrick Garland, that President Obama nominated. From a political standpoint, McConnell looks like a genius now for holding off on confirming that 5th seat, because the Supreme Court now is very evenly balanced between 4 Republican-appointed judges, 4 Democrat-appointed judges. One side is liberal, the other side is conservative. The 5th vote is the deciding vote, and these are lifetime appointments, and so the Supreme Court appointment is not for the next 4 years, it's potentially for a generation. So we have, I think we have a new president coming in who has wide latitude. And I think we have to trust the Constitution, which was written to protect against despots and despotic behavior. If the worst things, the worst fears about Donald Trump come true, if he gets baited by someone and he decides he wants to do something that's disproportionate, it's up to Congress and the courts to stop him. He has pretty much laid out what he wants to do in his opening 100 days. He actually delivered a speech. He called it the Gettysburg Address, and he delivered it about 10 days before the election. It outlined his major proposals. It didn't get much attention because he was fuming about how he was going to sue all the women who came forward to charge him with sexual assault. I think those lawsuits are not going to happen either. Immigration, he build a wall is a signature cry for his campaign. I think he has to build something. And I guess if I were a contractor in Arizona, I'd be getting a bid together. He wants a beautiful wall with a big opening. Some members of Congress are saying, how about a fence? There are some fences, there are some walls. It's 2,000 miles of a border. a significant wall would cost, it's been estimated, $5 billion. Congress is not going to give him that money. So I think that may be taken care of symbolically, but not realistically. The cabinet, we haven't heard any cabinet appointments yet. Rudy Giuliani has been speculated to fill everything from Attorney General to Secretary of State. And Newt Gingrich, another golden oldie, I guess I would call Newt. He's been one of the loyalists around Donald Trump, and Trump rewards loyalty. So I think we're going to see that inner circle is going to get placed. Obamacare, as I said, repeal and replace was the Republican slogan, but it's a complicated process. There will be changes made. Probably more power will be given to more flexibility to the states, but I don't see that being uprooted the way some Republicans thought might happen. But this is the fun part now that we're in. You know, who he nominates for these top positions and how he staffs his government. So many in his party shunned him, so I think he will be cognizant of rewarding those who stuck by him when a lot of other people were laughing. The Supreme Court appointment, it's speculated that Ted Cruz might get that, and that's kind of half a joke because Ted Cruz is so disliked. He would win unanimous approval from the Senate, and they'd be happy to get rid of him. But he also is a very good constitutional lawyer and has argued many cases before the Supreme Court. So I don't think that's totally impossible. From my perspective, I think climate change takes the biggest hit with this election. Unless Donald Trump really climbs down from the position he took during the campaign, he has said that climate change, global warming, is a hoax that's perpetrated by the Chinese. So it forecloses any major initiatives, but he can't fully avoid it because places in this country, Florida, Louisiana, going to face ongoing challenges. And if the water starts to rise on Collins Avenue in Miami, Donald Trump is going to have to look at some federal policies around mitigation, if not prevention of climate change. But my bottom line is that for all the coverage that Donald Trump has gotten, we don't know him very well. We really don't know a lot about how he will operate, how he takes in information, whether he listens to a lot of different viewpoints. There have been many articles written now talking to people who've worked with him, and there was one gentleman who said that whoever talks to him last has the edge, and that he used to camp out in his office to try to make sure he was the last one to speak to him, which is, I think, why President Obama is trying to say nice things about Donald Trump in the hopes of getting his ear on some significant policies. As a CEO, he tends to pick a few big projects to work on and delegates the rest. And there was that one rather famous anecdote from the campaign when I think one of Trump's children or one of the top campaign guys approached Ohio Governor John Kasich about potentially joining the ticket as vice president, and told Governor Kasich that he would have broad powers over over domestic and foreign policy. And Kasich allegedly asked, what would the president do? And the answer was, he'd be traveling the country making America great again. Now, that's marketing, and Donald Trump is very good at marketing. So people say he's a fast learner, and so I think we can all hope that he picks up on the other aspects of the job. Which leads me to President Obama had an hour-long press conference this afternoon in which he said he is leaving for Greece, Germany, and Peru tonight, and that he would be carrying a message from the president-elect that there is, quote, enormous continuity between the outgoing administration and the incoming administration, and that there will be no lessening of resolve towards NATO or the transatlantic alliance. And this is big because our allies in Europe and elsewhere have been really nervous about what a Trump presidency would mean, because he has seemed to denigrate the value of these alliances, and he's espoused what we call an America First policy, suggesting he would be pulling back from many of these alliances because they're not paying enough. And Obama also made the point that these alliances are not just good for our friends abroad, they're good for America. Obama was given several opportunities in this press conference to say something negative about Donald Trump, and he refused to take any of them. He said he has won. He deserves the time and the space to make his decisions and to figure out how he's going to separate his campaign rhetoric from the policies he actually wants to pursue. Now, President Obama has a lot at stake here, how Obamacare evolves, the Iran treaty, the Paris Climate Treaty. On the campaign trail, Trump has variously suggested he would disavow these treaties, he would tear them up, or he would, with the Iran treaty, he now is starting to say that he will police it so well that if they do anything to violate it, that he will know about it. So he's gotten more moderate on that as well. And I think there also is a question about civility and the quality of discourse that we have in this country. And I think it really sank to a new low in the campaign. And Obama said that he urged the new president to reach out with some gestures to people who he insulted or groups that oppose him, to assure them that he will now be president of all of the people. Interesting, as the new government starts to take shape, the new chief of staff was announced. It's Reince Priebus, who was the Republican National Committee chairman, who basically stuck with Trump throughout the campaign while others in the party were saying the party should disavow him. So he's been rewarded, and he is seen as a kind of a solid establishment Republican, if you will. And the other appointment that's been announced is Steve Bannon, who is the creator of the new site Breitbart, which basically caters to the far right, what has come to be known as the alt-right. And that has created quite an outcry, not only among Democrats, but among some Republicans who also are not comfortable with someone who is that partisan being in the White House. There is a history of putting someone in the White House who can protect your base, and like it or not, that alt-right base is now part of the Trump coalition. So you have Steve Bannon in the White House, and then you have the commitment that Trump has made that he's going to drain the swamp. But when you look at the people who've been named to the transition, and the way the transition works is the incoming administration names someone as a liaison with every department and agency to work closely so this handover can be accomplished. They released the list of the Trump transition people, and was one lobbyist after another. And the person who is assigned to work with EPA is actually a climate change denier who's known as Mr. Oil. So I look at this talk about draining the swamp, and I see maybe the water's out, but the reptiles are still there. I mean, I would love it if Donald Trump came in and upended a lot of the lobbying power in Washington. But I think he's going to have a real struggle because that's what Washington is, and that these so far are the people that he's turning to. His operating style we'll learn more about. He's said to have a very short attention span. He likes everything sort of kept to one page, and that's not necessarily bad. That was Ronald Reagan's style. It forces the people around you to kind of boil down their thoughts. And Obama said that a lot of what they talked about when they met last week was how you run a White House. And Obama said to him, you know, if you don't get good people around you, you're going to be going back to the residence every night with a stack of briefing books, and you'll just get buried under all that. You don't see Donald Trump spending his evenings going through briefing books. So who he puts around him is very significant. Then there are the family conflicts. I don't know how many of you watched. Donald Trump was interviewed on 60 Minutes. It was a Sunday night. It was a very good interview. And his daughter, Ivanka, was also interviewed. She couldn't be more lovely or more articulate, and she is saying she's not going into the administration, that she'll be operating as a daughter, but she will be fighting for child care and for education because she feels passionate about these issues. I think that's great. And if she can pull it off and get money out of Congress for these programs, that's something Obama couldn't do, something Hillary wanted to do. If Ivanka Trump, working with her father, can pull off some of these programs, I think that would be great. I think that Donald Trump is likely to get a big infrastructure package out of the Republican Congress. Obama proposed it year after year. They didn't want to spend any money, and they didn't want to give him a victory. So that could happen. Tax reform, but there are numbers attached to all these things, and you can't just say you want everything. You have to figure out how to pay for it. And so Donald Trump, again, he's going to get gobsmacked with reality pretty quickly here. So it's not exactly Mr. Smith goes to Washington. It's more like Daddy Warbucks goes to Washington, given his wealth. But his allegiances and his impulses don't necessarily line up all the way with the Republican Party. He is a former Democrat, and he's never worked within the labyrinthine corridors of government. He's going to pretty soon get a whole lot of scrutiny of everything he does. The Trump University lawsuits are still going forward. He'd be smart to settle those to avoid that. All of the business conflicts, I think the press is not going to let up. I don't know whether they have any power to affect anything on him. For starters, will the IRS complete the audit on his tax return, which he claimed why he couldn't release it? I don't think we're ever going to see a Donald Trump tax return. But he's also going to have to deal with the restraints of being president, just the physical restraints. Bill Clinton once said that the White House was the crown jewel of the American prison system. You don't go anywhere without a pool of reporters following you. I think this is going to be this is a big transition for Donald Trump, and I think after all the initial shock of the election and the changeover, I think you're going to see an invigorated media, an invigorated Democratic Party and Republican Party, and I guess, as Obama said in his press conference today, there's a reason for term limits. I think a lot of people would kind of like him to stick around for another term, but it's done. And once the 2 terms are done, it's a new president, a new page is turned, and if you don't like it, you need to get engaged and fight about it. And but you do need to give the new guy a chance, and I guess that's where I am. So with that, I would like to take your questions. I'm hoping some of you have some questions. Did everybody here vote, first of all? You know, 42%, or is it 47%? Almost the country that is eligible to vote did not vote. And a lot of those people are going to be most hurt by the proposals that are likely to come out of this administration. And I just don't know how you get that message across to people that, you know, voting matters, elections matter. Your individual vote really, really does count. So maybe I'd love it if all of the people who are out in the streets now protesting, I wish they all had stickers on that say I voted and everything, because I think that amplifies their voice and their right to speak. But when you don't vote, you basically just reinforce the decision you probably didn't want in the first place. So I have 3 grown sons, and I've always told them, you could do anything, and I'll love you, and you can come home. But if you don't vote, you're in big trouble. So, okay, with that, I can't see too well from up here because the lights are in my eyes.
So we've got some time for questions.
Okay.
I've got one over here. Get the mic somewhat close. And sorry. Yeah.
All right, is this good? All right, you said you explained about what the alt-right was. Well, the problem, the thing about the alt-right is that the ideology, it's very spread out, because I've sort of looked into the alt-right myself ever since Hillary Clinton gave that speech, and it's not really, I mean, there's 2 distinctions. There's the ones who politically identify as the alt-right, like people like Milo Yiannopoulos, who's the chief editor of Breitbart Tech, who's sort of aligning with it because it's sort of outside the establishment right that was sort of bombarded against Trump. And then there's those who socially define as the alt-right, and these are sort of the more ugly kind of underhand, like the more KKK kind of white supremacists. But the problem with the labeling all the alt-right is sort of like this sort of group of everyone. It's sort of labeling those who culturally define them and the sort of those who are the more seedy underbelly kind of alt-righters. So what I would like to, or I was just sort of trying to say, like, that there's kind of needs to be a kind of distinction. It's not really a question. It's just, I was just wondering, like.
Yeah, well, you know more about it than I do, and alt-right is a kind of a computer term too, and it's trying to distinguish this new voice of right, which does kind of embrace, I guess, it embraces white nationalism or white identity. And, you know, that's fine up to a certain point, but it gets into an uncomfortable area. And you're probably right, a lot of people get lumped under that title who maybe don't really want to be there either. And when I look at a lot of the things that Trump said, and I like to think that most people voted for him despite that, not because of it, but I think there are probably some people who voted for him because it was like giving the middle finger to everybody in Washington and to all the elites that they feel, you know, look down on them. And so I understand that he has to keep that base. He has to deliver for those people as well as everybody else. And, you know, Ronald Reagan had Pat Buchanan in the White House too, and Pat Buchanan is a kind of a cultural conservative because Reagan felt that he needed to stay in touch with the right that Pat represented, and George H.W. Bush had a advisor in his office called Lee Atwater, who, as some people say, began the era of negative campaigning, and on his deathbed, he apologized for what he had done. So does Breitbart fall in that tradition? I mean, George W. Bush had Karl Rove, who was very political. So Breitbart is, we know his website, but we don't know much about him. He doesn't seem to give interviews or speak. So, you know, however, whether he or the alt-right is being fairly or unfairly characterized, that appointment has injected a real note of caution for people who, you know, want Donald Trump to proceed without further inflaming these divisions in the country.
Other questions? Jamie, and then I'll come back here.
What do you think of the prospect of the faithless voter in the Electoral College? I mean, I think it's kind of pie in the sky to imagine that all of the voters that they would need to have the vote go to the House would actually change their vote, but do you think there will be any lasting impact on political discourse if even a few change their vote in light of the protests?
Yeah, every 4 years we have this discussion about the Electoral College and how unfair it is and how it gives more weight to people who live in states with smaller populations and really denies voting strength to California, Texas, New York, and nothing ever happens because people can't really figure out how to come up with an alternative, and it is a constitutional creation, so you're really delving into that area. During the 2000 election, when Al Gore won millions more popular vote than George Bush did, and it took 36 days or 37 days before they came up with a winner thanks to the Supreme Court, there was a lot of talk about faithless electors, and I think maybe there was one who was talking to the press. It just never materialized, and if for some reason they put the election into the House of Representatives, the House is Republican, and each delegation would get one vote, and that would just secure Donald Trump. He enters office, he won under 50% of the vote. Republicans lost seats in both the House and the Senate. So you can kind of flip it around to, I mean, I look at it now as this sort of red wall in Washington, but, if I calm down a bit, I see that he has a lot of reassuring to do to the American people. If you're president, you don't want a lot of people protesting in the streets day after day, and you don't want a lot of people thinking that you're really unfit to hold this office. So he needs to take some steps to try to reassure people that he's a better leader than the way he behaved during the campaign, and to try to take some confidence building measures. Obama talked about him he said, he's a gregarious person. He likes to mix it up, But I think Obama was looking at him like one politician to another. And you gotta hand it to Trump. What he pulled off was pretty spectacular. And then at the end, with every polling company and every pundit confidently saying, Hillary Clinton was going to win, and then on election night he wins. I mean, to stun the whole country and to dispatch with, how many opponents did he have, 16 or 17? He touched something in the country. And again, as Obama said, it wasn't just the negative stuff which got so much coverage. He also appealed to the aspirations of the American people. America's going to be so great, we're going to win all the time, we're going to win so much, we're going to be tired of winning. I kind of laughed at that, but he appealed to people to think big and dream big. And Hillary Clinton was so confident, and her people were, that she was going to be the president, that she was very careful about making promises. She didn't want to say anything that she couldn't deliver on, and so there weren't any bold promises. There weren't any slogans that people could cheer about, and I think that also contributed to her loss. She didn't inspire anybody.
One more question here.
I have a question about, how do you think Trump's would, how he had some stance against the Arabs and the Muslims? I was wondering, what do you think, how you'll deal with it now since he's president?
Yeah. I don't see him proposing a ban on all Muslims. I do not see Congress passing a ban on all Muslims. If he wants to crack down further on immigration, he would have to get, I guess, more money from Congress, and I think Paul Ryan was just quoted saying, we're not going to be beefing up the deportation task force. Now, Little known fact, Barack Obama deported more people in his first term than George W. Bush did in 8 years. Obama thought that by being tough on people who had broken the law and sending people back, that he would somehow build trust with a Republican Congress and he would get a rational immigration reform bill. It didn't happen. So if you look at the way Obama has enforced the immigration laws, I don't see Trump making a big variation from that. And the president is also going to appeal to him, now whether this will work or not, but not to, on the first day, sign an executive order that takes away DACA, which was the deferred action for children who were brought, for immigrants, illegal immigrants who were brought here as children, and as Obama said in his press conference today, did nothing wrong. Are American kids for all extents and purposes. They go to school here, they join the military, and his executive order freed them from the concern of being deported. Now, is Donald Trump really gonna, if he takes that away, is he really then gonna get the immigration forces to single out these people and go after them? So there are some realities. It costs money to get more border agents. I think he talked about getting more border agents. If he's going to get the money for that, if he's going to get the money for building infrastructure, he wants the money for tax cuts. You can't get all that money out of Congress without giving up something. So I think in the Senate also you have like John McCain and Jeff Flake, the Arizona senators, who are very opposed to Donald Trump. I think there are going to be some people who are saying these policies are not worth pursuing. It's not who we are. But he has sowed a lot of fear in people. People are genuinely frightened. And I can't guarantee that he's not going to follow through. He's been so erratic that it's probably, it's maybe a fool's errand to say he's going to rise to the occasion. But I think for the moment now, I guess, wasn't it Ronald Reagan who had that slogan, trust but verify? So, let's give him the benefit of the doubt while pressing him and being ready to fight back, should he overstep in any of these policies that he has suggested. But so far, it looks like he's climbing down from a lot of that rhetoric, which makes me angry on the one hand, because that's how he won. He won making a lot of promises. He's also promised he's bringing the coal industry back. Those jobs are not coming back. And so he made a lot of promises he probably can't deliver on, and I don't want him to. So.
That was the last question. There'll be some time here after we thank her for, if you want to come up and talk with her. Again, she's speaking tomorrow at about 5 o'clock at the Bella Amore Living Learning Community. Will you please join me in thanking Ms. Clift?